All right. Well, thanks to you, Eric, for accepting the invitation. It's a great pleasure to have you in our seminar. So to those who are not familiar with the seminar series, just a very few words. This is Federated Learning One World Seminar. We started more than a year ago. By now, we've had more than 40 talks. All of them get recorded. They're on YouTube. And we try to cover, at least in the long term, all aspects of federated learning, including theory, applications, systems, the models, just everything. So far, we only managed to cover a tiny fraction of what's going on, but we hope to expand in all directions. Today is really great pleasure to have Eric Molin, who's a professor at École Polytechnique, and to give his talk on applying some ideas which connect quantization and Bayesian learning to federated learning. And so Eric is a great scientist and mathematician who's worked on many areas, not just federated learning, which I understand is recent undertaking, but more generally stochastic optimization, statistical learning, Markov chain, Monte Carlo, and Markov models and other things. And today he'll really talk about this quantization, distributed learning, Bayesian approach, and all combined in one beautiful theoretical work. So please, Eric, go ahead.
Thanks a lot, Peter. Thanks a lot, Peter, for the nice introduction. So this is a privilege when you are old, so you have the time to work on a lot of topics. Also, it's like when you are so close to retirement like me, you know, so you have time to work on many things. Okay, that's the privilege of age. There are very few privileges, but at least you have this privilege. So in fact, I will present two things. So two works, which are, and these two works, this is works which have been done mostly for NeurIPS last year. So it's, as I said to Samuel before the seminar, it's very fresh. So I am also fresh in federated learning. So I really started to work on this topic with Emric something like 1 year ago. So I am also fresh in this area. And so we did several things. So I will present, in fact, two ideas, so which correspond to two submissions to NeurIPS. I'm not sure that will become article. I'm not sure. I think probability of becoming an article is not very high, but yes, I think we will resubmit. You know the business. Okay, so it's so the first part is will be based on, and I think it's. The two parts are very, so for you are very familiar with the two parts. So the first part is it's called QLSD. So it's like look a little bit like a QHCD, but with a different objective in the sense that we are trying to perform federated learning, but in a Bayesian context. So instead of simply optimizing a criterion, what you are pretending to do is that what you're willing to do, not pretending to do, so you just learn the posterior distribution of parameters. So there are many steps. And we just there are not much work on Bayesian learning, but there are a lot of work in machine learning for what is called Bayesian neural networks, and in general how to perform uncertainty quantification, because Bayesian neural networks is a way to do uncertainty quantification in machine learning. So this is why I'm interested in this area. So today that will be my first talk, and my second talk is I would say more classical, and it's an investigation of how to apply the vector quantization to classical federated learning methods. So it's like we focus on the compressor, and so I think the idea is nice. It's more like on the compressor side, and the other one is on the Bayesian side. As I said, so I did not have much time to prepare the talks, and so there will be a lot of imperfections. So I just want to apologize for the imperfections. So the first work has been done with in collaboration with Vincent Plassier. So Vincent Plassier is a PhD student at Lagrange Mathematical and Computing Research Center in Paris, which is a very nice place. If you want to visit Paris, it's a place that you should visit, and École Polytechnique. And it's a joint work with Maxime Bonneau, which is with postdoc at Lagrange, Alain Durmus, who is former PhD of mine, so now working at INS, École Normale Supérieure in Paris, and Émeric Dieuleveult is an assistant professor at École Polytechnique, and myself. Okay, so of course, so what is a federated learning context? Very, very short, just to set up the notation. So what people are willing to do, so they are willing to learn a model. So of course, there are, as you know, data privacy issues, you are communication constraints, and what people are not willing to do, they are not willing to share the data. So what the way the problem is done is that everyone is keeping his own data, and what you are willing to optimize is a kind of the sum over some kind of loss function that's not the Bayesian setting, that's the classical federated learning setting. So what you are doing is basically you are willing to optimize to find the solution theta star. So imagine you have to imagine that this quantity exists, and we will make very, very strong condition under which this will be true. And each of these UI theta are basically obtained by summing up loss functions there over a data set which is owned by the client number I. Okay. So you have several clients, which is the number of clients is B there, and then what you are willing to compute is this quantity. So the way to proceed, so we use, so there are many, many techniques which have been proposed. So we use a kind of a method where you have a parameter server. So you have a parameter server and you have clients. And at each iteration, what happens is that the server broadcasts a parameter, which is theta, okay? So that the client might access, and what they do, the user are performing computation. So typically they either update locally a parameter, or they do few updates, or they compute simply gradients, and then what they do is that they just upload to the server the information that they have obtained. And the main server is just updating its parameter. So there are many, and you know, if you are there, you know that there are many variants which have been proposed. But if you see that from very far away, there are variants where you basically update the parameter. So it's more like something like federated averaging, and the other is QHGD with all these many variants. And what we describe today is more like a QHGD style. So how you to adapt QHGD to Bayesian setting. And of course, it's also interesting to know how you could adapt federated averaging to a Bayesian setting. So it's a work which is so we are working on federated averaging, but so we start with QHGD, and this is what I will describe today. So what is a QHGD in this very the most simple version? So what you do in QHGD, so you have big clients in parallel. So at each iteration, they receive a parameter which is theta k. So what they are estimating a local gradient. So typically they take a mini batch of observations, and they compute out of this mini batch, they compute a gradient. And because there are communication constraints, they apply a compressor. So there is a way to compress the information, which is called by C, which is, there are many compressors which have been proposed. I will describe some of the properties of this compressor, and I will describe the compressor in the next talk. And what you do typically is that you update from this, so you send this information to the parameter server, and then on the parameter server, then you update theta k plus 1, and then you go on the loop. So what you do with the compressor, so the compressor is just simply aimed at taking the gradient and transmitting the gradient with, say, d bits, okay? So you start from the full resolution gradient, and then you obtain a certain number of bits. And so here we take two assumptions without, no. So there are many compressors which satisfy this assumption, which are quite classical. The first assumption is the unbiasedness. So we'll assume that, of course, the compressor is itself as a random mechanism, which guarantees that for each x, which it would be x would be a gradient in this case, the expectation of C of x is equal to x, which is called unbiasedness. And also you have something which is relative error, so which means that if you compute the expectation with respect to the randomness in the compressor of C of x minus x to the square, this is less than some omega x square. Okay, so there are many compressors which satisfy these two quantities. And there are results which have been obtained, in particular by Peter and his team, which shows the following thing. So what I will work with a very, very simple assumption. So what I will assume, so if you are willing to do something very simple in optimization, you have to assume that the function uig are strongly convex. So which means that because you are strongly convex, of course, the problem or the minimization problem is a single minimum. So I will always assume that the gradient of ug theta prime minus the gradient of ug theta is Lipschitz. So it's L is a Lipschitz constant. And there are two quantities which plays a key role. So one quantity which is of course natural, which is a kind of the variance of this of the noise. So here I take, so there are several assumptions which can be made, but what I assume there is that the variance I call sigma star, it's a variance of the stochastic gradient at theta star, at the value of theta star. In some analysis, you need something more stringent, something like, for example, you can have a bound on the variance of the gradient, which is valid for all parameter theta, but here I simply have to assume that I have this variance when I have when the value of the parameter theta is equal to theta star, which is the minimum, and you have a quantity which plays a key role, and this is where federated learning is different, for example, from other classical, I would say, stochastic approximation method, is that you have a quantity which measure, in fact, the discrepancy, the distribution of the data set, the fact that, of course, the parameter theta star is good on average, but is not necessarily good for each individual user or clients. And this is measured by the norm of the gradient of the loss function or the average of function at convergence. And this is called beta star. And the convergence result, say that you may obtain, is the following. So it's very, very simple. So you have something which is more or less a kind of exponential factor, which express the exponential convergence to something like stationarity. So it appears there. And compared to classical methods, then you have you see there an element which is called for beta star. So you have it's not only theta zero minus theta star which comes into play, but you have an additional factor which is linked to the discrepancy of this of the gradient of each individual user. And then you have a stationary regime. So the stationary regime, which is on the scale of gamma, okay, divided by mu, so that's very classical. And then you have two terms inside of it. You have, of course, the variance, that's what you have in non-federated learning case. So it would be the variance at convergence, okay? And then you have a beta star square, which is linked with this quantity, so which linked with discrepancy at convergence, which is called the heterogeneity of the data. Okay, so you can do better, and you can do better if you simply follow the work by Peter and his students. So one was Mishenko, so in 2018, and the idea is 19, sorry, and which where you introduce a memory term. And this memory term, in fact, is aimed at decreasing the heterogeneity, the influence of heterogeneity of the data. So what you will do, so instead of simply sending the gradient, the stochastic gradient, you send the stochastic gradient, but you add something which which acts like a control variate. So it's like a control variate acting on the gradient. So you will subtract to the stochastic gradient, to subtract a kind of predictor of the stochastic gradient, and this predictor, and then you have a way to update eta k plus 1 I, which is equal to eta k plus alpha times this error. So you have some alphas there. So it's funny because it really looks like something which is very well known in signal processing, which is called ADPCM. So it's adaptive DPCM, or DPCM, which it's a method which is which has been used, in fact, to reduce compression noise already in when you transmit simply signal over channel. And the nice idea there is that you don't need really to so you can, the very nice idea is that you don't need to transfer the control variate eta ki, because you can update the way it is constructed. Of course, it's constructed with a quantity which is sent to the server. So which means that the server can exactly reconstruct the error eta ki, so which means that you can produce eta ki locally, and then you can also recompute eta ki on the central server, okay, which is perfectly fine. So there's no need to transfer eta ki. So it's a control variate which can be evaluated on the client side and on the server side. And then what you do but you will update, and you update according to this quantity, and then you update eta k plus 1 like this. Okay, so it's yes, it's very fine. And if you do this, you obtain convergence results which are better. Okay, and the idea is why they are better, because this quantity typically will tend to 0. Whereas if you look at these quantities, this will not tend to 0. So you will have this is much better. And if you look at the convergence results, so I don't spend much time to explain because you are all experts here of this. What you have here, so you see that now in this regime, so which means when you are in the stationary regime, of course, you have replaced, you are no longer dependent in beta square, but you have a dependence in alpha. So alpha was the alpha used in the algorithm times some constant C. So in fact, so the discrepancy now comes only from, so the beta star square, which can be large, of course, only show up in front of this in the transient term, but not on the stationary term. Okay, so as I said, in fact, what I'm interested in is not really to do optimization, but what I'm willing to do is I'm willing to sample, in fact, to obtain sample from parameters. So which means what I want to do on the server side, at least I want to do quantization of errors. So there are two problems when you do Bayesian statistics. So what you will do to typically, what is the objective? The objective is not to optimize a function, but rather to sample. So what you are willing to sample, you are willing to sample according to this posterior distribution. And the posterior distribution is simply equal to the product of I equal 1 to B of exponential minus UI, theta, of course. So that's this quantity are in the quantities that you are willing to when you do optimization, you minimize this quantity, but here you are not minimizing the quantity, you are willing to sample according to this distribution. And of course, this is not, if you simply look at this product is not is not properly normalized, so you have to multiply it by z pi minus 1, and z pi minus 1 is a normalizing constant. So it means that the likelihood that the function, that the density that you are willing to sample from is known up to normalizing constant. Okay. But then there are many other issues when you are really willing to implement Bayesian statistics in uncertainty quantification in a federated learning setting. So I will just I simply describe the way to produce sample on the server side, and then of course there is another thing to do. Of course, is to be able to broadcast this. You will not broadcast the sample or the sample to the clients. Okay, this is one possibility, but it will be very costly. So there are other way, which is to summarize more or less the samples that you have obtained. So that's the main difficulty when you are, but which are the same. So it's not specific to federated learning. It's also specific to when you use Bayesian statistics in deep learning, because the parameter size is huge. So you are not willing. So you are willing to more or less summarize the information from the posterior in a much more compact way. So I just described so my objective is not to describe everything to make Bayesian neural network work, but simply what I will describe is a way to obtain sample on the server side of this distribution. So what typically is what are the example, and in theta will be, so for example, the parameter of a deep net or something like this, and then you are willing to obtain that. So what you can use, so typically what you do when you do Bayesian statistics, you do, so instead of retaining, so basically the first thing, and this is one way Bayesian statistics is used, so instead of using a single copy of the parameter, so what you will typically do is that you produce several copies of the parameter theta k according to this posterior distribution, okay? And what you do when you compute a quantity, you compute Bayesian estimator, and Bayesian estimator is simply obtained by taking the function of interest, okay, and then integrating the function of interest according to the posterior distribution of the parameter given the learning data which are okay. So that's the first application. And one example, for example, is this is why it's useful. In general, it's when you test Bayesian ideas, of course, it's a nice thing to test, is to learn what is called the predictive distribution. So you get a new test sample, something which has not been observed in the original distribution. And what you are willing to obtain is a predictive distribution of this new test sample. So which means it's conditional distribution of the label y given x, so the value of the regressors, and given d, so which is the rule set of the observation. And if you believe in the Bayesian setting, so this predictive distribution is obtained by integrating the likelihood function, so py given x and theta. You integrate this Bayesian distribution according to the posterior distribution, so pi theta given d, okay? And because, of course, this integral are in super large dimension, you use a kind of Bayesian sample. So you will sample from this distribution. So you obtain theta k, which are sampled from the posterior distribution, and you average basically the likelihood at the point theta k. Okay, so that this is why it's a bit different from what is done when you do optimization. Okay, so there is one, so there are many methods to produce samples, but if you look at what people have done, basically in machine learning, there are mostly two techniques which have been used to produce samples. One technique which is to use Hamiltonian dynamics, which are which are very interested, and the most popular method is to use Langevin dynamics. So basically, this is what I describe here. So what you will do is that you will what is a Langevin dynamics? So basically, what you do is that Langevin dynamics is a stochastic differential equation, so SDE, or diffusion process, if you wish, which is given by this stochastic differential equation. Here, dBT is a Brownian component. Okay, so it's exactly looks like, if you just forget dBT, it exactly looks like a gradient descent in continuous time, but you add a Brownian part. And because you add the Brownian part, you obtain what is called a Langevin distribution. It has been observed by physicists at the 30s, so it's not a recent result, which says that this SDE, in fact, has this SDE under very mild assumptions. So basically, you need to have some kind of coercivity. So this process should, of course, satisfy some conditions, like it should not explode. So you have some conditions. Of course, the SDE should be well defined, so which means that you have some regularity conditions which need to be satisfied for the gradient, for example, Lipschitzness. But there is a result which is true under very weak condition, is that this diffusion, in fact, is reversible with respect to pi, and this and because it is reversible, pi is also an invariant distribution. In the invariant distribution, it's the Gibbs measure associated with this potential. So the Gibbs measure is exponential minus the sum from I to B of ui theta, and this is the normalizing term that you don't need to compute. Okay, so which means that if you are able to run these diffusion terms, then you will obtain, it will not converge because it's a diffusion, so it does not go to one point. So but if you look now far in the future, so then the value theta t will be distributed according to the Gibbs measure, which is given there. Okay, so it's very it's nice, and then of course because of this, it has been observed, and it's one of the earliest use of MCMC. So in fact, it can be traced back to the work by Grenander in the 70s. Not in finite learning context, but in machine learning. It was even before MCMC becomes it. So which means people used Langevin diffusion to sample posterior distribution even before MCMC ever exists. So you can find trace of this in work by, say, Grenander in the 70s. Okay, so how to proceed? So not in this setting. So what you will do is that you will do a kind of discretization of the diffusion. So there are many possible discretization, but in fact, the most used diffusion is the Euler-Maruyama scheme. So which is like a Euler scheme, of course. And what you do typically is that Euler scheme, you start with something which looks like exactly like a stochastic gradient. So it's not stochastic here, it's like a gradient. And then on the top of this, you will add, a random noise. So it's zk plus 1 there because it's a discretization of the Brownian motion. So zk plus 1 would be typically multidimensional, multivariate normal distribution. Okay, so this is the way to proceed. And so there is the first algorithm that you might have in mind is that, okay, so if you want to proceed with this, so what you will do, so you have a parameter server, so you can broadcast exactly like before. You broadcast the parameter theta k at each iteration. So then each server can compute the full gradient, okay, broadcast it back to the server, and then you add some amount of noise, and you will converge to the Gibbs measure associated to the target Gibbs measure. But of course, there is a computational cost. So in order to solve for the computational cost, what typically people do is that they use a stochastic gradient. So instead of using the full gradient, you compute the gradient on the mini batch. So that solves the computational cost, but you have to be a little bit careful because when you simply use mini batch without variance reduction, then you will it's not as beautiful as in stochastic gradient descent. So you really need to use, and I will explain that you really need to use variance reduction. Otherwise, you will not converge. So the noise that you introduce in the stochastic gradient will more or less screw up the distribution. So you need to be very careful with this. So it's not as simple as classical SGD. Variance reduction is very, very important in this when you are really willing to perform. If you are really interested in the Gibbs measure, you really need to be a little bit more careful. And of course, there are communication constraints. So the communication constraint, because you don't want to compute the full gradient, but you know how to handle this. You have to handle this by using compression. Okay, so what you do typically is that so in the first version that you can analyze, you have a server. So what you do at each iteration, you broadcast the parameter, you simply compute the stochastic gradient. Okay, then you just you make it unbiased, so you just have to divide. So I assume there that that you have the same number of observation on each sample. So it's like this becomes like you have n. So each client with the same number of observation. Of course, it's just not to overburden the notation. Of course, you can make it different. But and then when you do this, you obtain an unbiased estimator of the gradient. Then you apply the compression operator, and then you broadcast it to the server. Okay, and that gives you a kind of the very simple stochastic gradient descent, the very simple quantized Langevin stochastic dynamic, which is like the Langevin version of the original QHGD algorithm. Okay, so it's but if you look at this, it defines a Markov chain. Okay, it's a Markov chain. So you have ZK plus 1, so which are an ID sequence. You have theta k, and there is a rule to produce theta k plus 1 according to theta k. Then there is some randomness. There are two randomness. There is one randomness coming from the compressor. Okay, and then you have a randomness coming from the noise that you intentionally add at each iteration, because you are not willing to optimize theta k, you are not willing to optimize the function, but you are willing to sample from Gibbs distribution. Okay, so which means that this quantized Langevin stochastic dynamics define a Markov chain, and the Markov chain is defined by a Markov kernel. So what is a Markov kernel? It's simply the conditional probability distribution. If you start at parameter theta, so then you define the sum distribution for the next value of the parameter theta 1. Okay, and so because so that's the one-step transition. And if you look now, if you start from the initial distribution, which is new, so the distribution of theta k is obtained by applying to this initial distribution mu. You apply k times the kernel associated to this algorithm. Okay, so this forecast follows. So you initialize theta 0, which is drawn according to distribution mu. You broadcast the parameter. You simply compute the compressor gk, and you send back gki. Okay, and then you do this, and you iterate. That's easy. And of course, it's a kind of very. So the only difference with basic SGD is that you have had this noise. Okay. So what are the assumptions that we do? So what we assume that U is L strongly convex and L Lipschitz. Okay, so we have not done yet the analysis in the non-convex case. So you have to be just a possible analysis in non-convex case, which is a bit more complicated. But it's more complicated, by the way. It's more complicated, but it's doable. But when you start to do Bayesian spacing, you start with simple assumptions. So the simple assumption is to assume that U is M strongly convex in Lipschitz. We have assumed that the compressor is unbiased, so which and at the same time that the relative has some relative error, which is with this coefficient omega. And what we also assume, it's not very strong assumption. We assume some what's called co-coercivity. So this will be true, for example, simply that if delta U, G, UIG, so it's there are two indices because I is the index of a client and G is the index, the observation for each individual client. What we have to assume is that the co-coercivity for this function. So it will be true, for example, if this function is simply itself Lipschitzian with coefficient Lig, which is bounded by M bar. So it's not a very strong assumption, but it's very important in our analysis. And what type of guarantees that you are looking at? So you are looking at some. So now you have a distribution. So what if you start from mu and then you apply the kernel k times, and then you obtain some distribution, which is mu q sharp k gamma. And what you will typically measure the distance in terms of with respect to pi. So pi is target Gibbs distribution. And so you need a distance in the space of measure. And the distance of the space of measures that you use is Wasserstein 2 distance. So W starts for Wasserstein. It's Wasserstein 2 distance. Okay. So what is Wasserstein 2 distance? Wasserstein 2 distance is defined as follow. So when you take two distribution, mu and say nu, the Wasserstein 2 distance, mu and nu, is equal to the infimum, okay, over the set of coupling gamma. So you couple the distribution mu and nu of the distance. So you look at this, it will be x minus y squared times gamma of dx dy. Okay, this is to the power, this is to the square. So you compute, and gamma, what is a coupling? So gamma belongs to a coupling of mu and nu. Means what? Means that if you take, so which it means that gamma is a distribution on the square. It's a distribution, if mu is a distribution on RD, it means that gamma is a distribution of the product. So it's a distribution on RD times RD, which is such that you have gamma of A times RD, which is equal to mu of A. So the first marginal of gamma is equal to mu, and the second marginal of gamma is equal to mu. Okay. And Wasserstein distance is an infimum of this quantity over all possible coupling. Okay. And you measure for all the minimum. So you take the infimum of this quantity over all possible coupling. And so what you obtain is the following. So this is a typical guarantees that you can obtain. It's very explicit. So what you see is that you have several terms. So there are terms which depends upon k. So this term will typically vanish when k goes to infinity. So that this is a kind of contraction term. And then you have terms which will stay. And these terms are given by that, so that the terms which are irreducible, so which means that when you see this, it means that even when k becomes large, you will never really converge to the Gibbs distribution pi, but you converge to something which is proportional to gamma. Okay, in fact, it's not very precise. So we see that. So in fact, it's more or less it should be gamma squared. But so you cannot improve there. So of course, gamma is not very, very good. And of course, all these constants, I did not show them, but all these constants can be computed completely explicitly. So you have transient term. Transient term reflects several things. It reflects how far the initial distribution is from the Gibbs measure pi, okay? And they refer also something which is more or less what is a variance under the initial distribution of with respect to theta star. So that's and then you have a quantity which is something which shows that the algorithm do not really converge to pi. It converges to, so you will, the distance don't go exactly to zero. It goes to some quantity, gamma b gamma sharp. And this quantity, of course, can be small if gamma is very small. But of course, there is a computational problem, because if you take gamma very small, of course, in that case, you will have to run a lot of simulation, because then the transient term would itself be very slow.
So Eric, can I?
Yep. Yeah, of course. Yep.
So is it the case that the gamma here, you can choose something like this m bar times omega plus 1, something like that?
Yes. You typically you obtain something which is typically gamma. Gamma bar will be something, the type of gamma bars you use in optimization. So it's exactly the same typically.
Okay.
Okay, so if you look at this term, so in fact I will look mostly at this term. So in fact, if you look inside this term, in fact you have two a bit like in optimization. So you have two problems. One comes from heterogeneity in the data, and the other comes from discretization errors. So discretization in the gradient. Okay, and the second term, in fact, comes from mini batching and also compression. So there are two types of errors. So what is just to give you a feeling of the proof? So the proof is in that case say quite simple. So it's not very simple, but it's quite simple in the sense that it will be much more complicated if you are not in the setting of in the case. So while you do analysis of Langevin algorithm, Langevin dynamics in the strongly convex case, in fact, there is the proof is not very complicated, because you can do a coupling of the discrete time dynamic and the continuous time dynamic. So what you do typically is that you will measure the distance in distribution, in Wasserstein distance, between the distribution of the diffusion itself, okay? So that, and you know that the diffusion converges geometrically fast to the Gibbs measure, and you simply compare it with the distribution of this Markov chain, which is given there, and you couple on the same path. So you use so here you have a Brownian part, and then you just use b gamma k plus 1 minus b gamma k. So you use exactly the same randomness in the discretization of the algorithm. So of course you don't have a gamma there because it's a Brownian motion on the variance of this Brownian motion would be exactly equal to gamma. So this is why I don't put a gamma here. Okay. And then what you do is that you check how you measure, in fact, how this quantity, how the diffusion itself is close to theta k plus 1 at each iteration. Okay. And then so you have to, it's calculation which are more or less, I will not go inside the calculation. Of course, there are some difficulties, but basically what you will prove basically is that you have a kind of contraction. So which means that under some, if you take some good condition on the step size gamma, and if you take some good condition on U, of course, and then this is where, of course, the strong convexity plays a key role. Then you might prove that this quantity, so this conditional expectation, in fact, is contraction. So there is a kind of contraction lemma, which is at the heart of all our derivation. Okay, if you are not strongly convex, in this case, the pattern of proof is different. So because there is no, so you cannot really couple things like that. So there is no direct coupling between continuous time dynamic and discrete time dynamic. So you need to use other arguments. Okay, you might perhaps continue to use coupling construction, but not necessarily what is called synchronous coupling. So you can use, for example, reflection coupling methods. So this is what we do with Alain, not in a federated learning case. There are other techniques which are not based on coupling, where you use other type of methods like entropy contraction. So there are different methods which have been proposed, linked with a much more sophisticated probabilistic tool like Malevin calculus or things like that. But in a strongly convex case, you can make it simple because you have a kind of what you can prove more or less. It's a kind of contraction. So if you run the diffusion and if you run your discretization, even in the federated learning case, you might prove that the two will converge. And because the Wasserstein distance is the infimum over coupling, of course, but you have defined the coupling because this is a coupling of the measure, and which means that you will prove at the end of the day that the Wasserstein distance is less than this quantity, and of course, this quantity you can bound it. Okay. Okay, so when as n goes to infinity, so you take a gamma of the size 1 over n. So and when n goes to infinity, so you don't go to 0. So n is the number of data in each batch. So what you will do is, and this is what I said, it's something that we have shown already in our Meurice paper with Nicolas Brosse, which was a PhD student of mine, 2018. So in fact, there is something which is deeply wrong if you do simply stochastic gradient without doing variance reduction. So what we did there is that we did, so a simple way to do variance reduction. Of course, there are better way, but when you are in a strongly convex case, there is a very simple way to do variance reduction. Is simply to compute theta star. So which means what we do is that you will run a stochastic gradient algorithm first. So you will determine theta star, and then you use delta U G theta star as a control variable for the gradient. So instead of instead of using the stochastic gradient, so the gradient evaluated on mini batch, what you do is that you use the gradient and you use delta U G theta star. So you just compute stochastic, so you use the control variates for the gradient. This is called the fixed point approach. So this is been described in Broos, and there is also a paper if you are interested. So Broos is in NeurIPS, and Baker is a paper in statistics and computing. It's a paper by Baker and Paul Furman, where this method is described. So and what we do is that we do QLSD, so which means that now you use compressors. So we use a compressor. So now what we do is that we use this gradient instead of the original gradient, and we put that in the compression operator. So now instead of having QLSD star, we have QLSD sharp, we have QLSD star. Okay. So it's easy, it's the same type of techniques. You simply, instead of computing simply stochastic gradient, you use stochastic gradient, and you add this control variate. You apply a compressor and you send GK to the server. The server updates the parameter, and then you continue. So there is only one difference there, is that you add these control variates. And if you under exactly the same assumption, in fact, you obtain basically the same result. Not a big surprise, but you have a different constant, and in particular, you have a constant which is gamma, big gamma star. And so in this big gamma star, you have discretization error, mini batch, and compression. But the thing which is good is that that the big gamma star, when now you take gamma, which is of the size of order n-1, okay, then the limit as n goes to infinity of gamma big gamma m star is equal to 0. Okay, so it's a nice result. Of course, theta star is difficult, so you can use different methods, and so the technique, which is there are two techniques which are more sensible than using theta star, and of course, because these techniques also apply to a non-convex case, for which we don't have result yet, but I think we will also work on the non-convex case. So what you can do first is that you can do a kind of stochastic variance reduced variance reduction. So it's exactly the same type of method like SVRG, or you can use a method like Spider. Okay, and on the top of that, you can use also the type of eta k which has been proposed in Mishenko, and then you end up with something which looks like, I don't remember, Diana or Marina. So Peter will help me. So it's like a Marina, no? Or where you couple, you have both variance reduction and your eta k, the error compensation term. So you have a control variate, and then on the top of that you have the memory term. So the whole scheme now looks a bit more complicated, because you have control variates, okay, and you have the kind of variance reduction term, a memory term. So this is our QLSD plus. Okay, so this time it looks like that. Okay, so it's a bit more complicated. You have this stochastic gradient. So you have now two loops. So it's exactly like in SVRG. You can do it like Spider. It's even a bit better to do it like Spider. And then what you obtain is that you have your stochastic gradients, and you have your control variates, and then you have your memory term, eta ki, that you can update locally. And then you send everything to the server. The server updates everything with eta k. So that's the rule from the server, and this is a rule which is used on each client. So each client updates its control variate HKI in an outer loop, Then in an inner loop, what you do is that you compute the gradient, you subtract the control variates, you add HKI, of course, and then you subtract the eta KI, which are the memory term. You update a memory term. The memory term you don't need to transmit. You don't need to transmit HKI because HKI is also something which is completely local. So this HKI you don't need to transmit. And you simply update on the central server this quantity. Okay? And then you obtain our best result. So this is the best result that we have, where so you still have this contraction term, okay? And then you have this gamma, and so you have the more or less the best thing that you can obtain. So we have big gamma square, and the quantity which is very important is that we have this residue term big gamma plus, and big gamma plus go to zero in QSD plus plus it goes to zero as when gamma is taken to be inversely proportional to the number of terms. So between the bias, of course, more or less vanish when you take a gamma of appropriate size. So I will not comment all the details there because I want to have sometimes to discuss my second project. Okay, and so we make some experiments. So in fact, that was first experiment is to do some kind of this kind of Gaussian example. So it's a very simple one. So it's like so this one is not very interesting. So so that's MSC. So we have much more examples in our paper if you're interested, and we are running a lot of examples right now. Especially we have examples where this so the thing I think which is interesting is more examples for on much larger setups, like for example deep learning. So we have some example with deep learning, so ImageNet and things like that. So we did not have, I think it's not included in the new paper because we did not have time to produce all the numbers, but now it's on the way. So if you keep, I will keep you updated when, if you're interested, we can keep you updated with new simulations that we are running. So there are many problems when you run Bayesian neural nets because you are in very large dimensions, so you have to be very careful of what you do. Especially there is a big problem which is not mentioned here, which is linked with the way you specify prior distribution, which is very crucial there. So for example, we had an example which is where we use logistic regression. So it's Bayesian logistic regression. So we have 50 clients. So we are in dimension 2, so which dimension 2 is not large, of course. So we have a data set of size 200. It's not much, so it's a 200 on each client. And we use a mini batch of size 20. And so we have a control variate. So we update the control variate every 100 points. And we use, as a compressor, we use the quantized SGD compression, so the same compression, so with one bit for each component. And what we obtain is something which is quite nice, in fact. And we also have something with a shallow BNN. So it's in fact it's one hidden layer BNN or two hidden layer BNN, if I remember well. So it's 100 number of clients. So it's a NIST database. So dimension is 700. So data set size is 6. So we have, it's exactly NIST, so that we have, so you have 60,000, but we just, each client has 600 data. So we take a mini batch of size 80 and we use NIST. And what we are, so we trained, so it's an experiment which is useful. It's like an experiment where you are willing to know whether a particular point is out of the distribution. So it's like out of distribution detection. So what we do is that this is your data set. So it's typically the training data sets. It's numbers, and you are showing to the you are showing to this to the at the test stage, you are looking at this type of data. Of course, this data you have to recognize that it doesn't look at anything like the data which are inside it. So what you do is that you compute this conditional predictive distribution. So you are computing this predictive distribution, and you look at the conditional entropy of it, and you see that conditional entropy shows that you are more or less rejecting. So if the predictive entropy of NIST becomes very small, so which means that basically you recognize that you are not belonging to the distribution from which you have learned, and if you look at predictive entropy on if the learning was fashionist, of course, the predictive entropy is better. So in fact, we have a lot of results like that. Okay, so we have what are the conclusions? Yep.
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Of course.
Okay, so of course, what you're doing here can be seen as adding compression and then dealing with the associated issues to Langevin and to various versions.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. This.
Another point of view could be that you take a variance-reduced Diana method for optimization and turn it into the sampling context.
Yes, this is basically what we do. In fact, it's like a Diana. It's like a Diana, and you add some noise on the server side, and then you have to prove. So the thing is that the guarantees that you obtain need to be are different. So in fact, when you look at the details, even when you start from the simple stochastic approximation point of view, so if you really look at the stochastic approximation point of view, in fact, this is because the objective is slightly different. So the objective of optimization is compute minimum. So the objective when you do Langevin is that you are computing a Wasserstein distance. So it's the objective are a bit different.
Of course.
Well,
the question
so it's
recover the optimization result out of this.
Yeah, so you recover. So in fact, for reasons which are not exactly the same, so it's so I would say so that it's funny in the sense that of course you use when you do the analysis of Langevin dynamic, you use basically the same type of descent lemma and things like that. So in fact, the ideas are using control variates for gradient, for stochastic gradient is beneficial, a bit exactly in the same way that is beneficial for optimization. Okay, but the result, of course, are slightly different. So you have it's okay. So it's of course it's superficially it's the same type of ideas, and because the same type of solution. So the solution which have been used for optimization also work and in the Langevin context, but the proof techniques are a bit different. I think they would be completely different. So they are closely related when you are in the strongly convex case, okay, on convex case. Of course, they would be completely different if you go outside the convex case. So for non-convex, in the non-convex setting, of course, you should do something which is completely different because there is. So here the idea is simple because what you do typically is that you do synchronous coupling. So there is synchronous coupling in the sense that you take your diffusion, okay, and you know that the diffusion is the diffusion itself as a correct is a nice diffusion which converges to Gibbs measure. And what you are able to do is that you are able to control exactly the difference between the diffusion itself, which has a correct distribution, and the algorithm that you run. Okay, so that's only true for strongly convex case. In the non-convex case, of course, this is no longer true. So you need to proceed completely differently. And of course, you can have guarantee. So it's a bit like in optimization, because in optimization you get the proof. Sometimes the guarantees that you obtain in convex optimization, in non-convex optimization, are very weak in some sense. It's like so it's like something like. If you draw a random point on a certain horizon, you will be close to a point which is first order point for the algorithm. So it's not enough to do analysis in a non-convex case. So you really need to proceed differently in that case. But in the strongly convex case, Yep.
Here's another question. Did you try to
Yeah.
think of not unbiased compressors, but biased compressors?
No, we don't have time, but that would be very interesting. Yeah. So I think it's very interesting to look at what would be what will happen with biased compressor. So it's so I think it's really a first attempt to do Bayesian analysis, and I think, of course, it's. I think if you take the proof that you get from the proofs that have been obtained in the convex case, strongly convex case for say Diana, and this proof will more or less, I think it because you will use this in a slightly different context, and there is another source of noise which comes from the Brownian part, but basically, in fact, it will. I think it will. So the result will carry out. So I think it's and I'm not aware of real results with in Bayesian settings. So there are no much results which have been proposed so far. So I think it's I more or less dig into the literature, and you know the literature in federated learning better than me. So there are very few. So there are some results which have been proposed. In general, it's more like practical results which have been people have done. For example, MCMC or something like that. But it's I never see for the time being. I never see a result where you can really prove consistency and things like that. Yeah, it's so I think it's original with respect to this.
Meet up also with Adil, who is here, and Lukang, a new student in my team, because they're interested in problems. And yeah, so there's some things that I'm sure we would.
Yeah, we can. Yes, we. So what we are doing right now? So we are. So we are. So we did that really in the early. So in the last spring. So it was like a rush to finish the paper, and so we have obtained. I think we have improved the result. And what we do right now is also to think about federated learning. And there are many things that we did not look at yet, like partial participation and things like this week. So we did not look at all this stuff. And so what we did is during the summer, so we have obtained, so we perform a lot of more convincing simulations and things like that. So now we have a better feeling of how it might work.
Right. So I know you wanted to give another minute talk.
No, but I think it's too late. I think it's
I would suggest maybe we just invite you next time.
Yeah. So no, I was too. So it's because I come back to vacation. So now I was in a Greek island, so it's like Greek style.
Energy, and you want to say it all.
We have time.
Yeah, of course.
No, sorry, I was too late. I was too slow. Sorry.
Another point in time, if you're still willing to give a talk. So maybe I'd like to open the discussion here to everybody who prevailed. So let me try to unmute people. So Samuel is not here right now. He had to run away for a moment. So let me see how I can unmute everyone and if I can actually do it. So please feel free to ask any questions. I'm going to raise your hand and I will unmute you that way. Yeah, I'm unmuting people one by one. So Samuel is much better at this. He knows how to do that in a more efficient way. So now, I see Adil is unmuted. So does it mean you wanted to say something?
Just say hello to Eric.
Hello, Adil.
And no, I had a question, but actually you answered, so it's fine.
Okay.
Okay, so everybody should be able to unmute yourselves now, I think. And if not, just raise your hand or write to me and I can unmute you. Okay, so you said that the non-convex setting is much more difficult because of this lack of coupling, right? But do you have already some ideas?
So yes, because we did that in non-federated learning case. So in fact we start with in a non-convex case.
Yeah.
And so there you need to because there are a lot of results which are in a continuous time. So for continuous time, a lot of things. Okay. and the way to obtain the result in continuous time comes from many different sources of. So there are many different ideas. So some come from PDEs, or some from functional analysis. So there are many ideas to prove convergence of SDE. And then what you need to do basically is to more or less to see that the perturbation. So there are methods to see that when you do perturbation, so when it's a perturbation of the diffusion, so it's more like a perturbation ID. So you have a lot of results for continuous time. So because basically you know more in continuous time process than in discrete time. So it's so there are many results for that. And then what you do typically is that you say, okay, so you more or less go to continuous time, and then show that, of course, it does not have too much to. So you see more or less a discrete time result, like a perturbation of continuous time result. So it's like something like that. So that's a way when you are not in the federated learning context case. And of course, in the federated learning, I did not start to think how you can adapt this type of ideas. So here, of course, in the context setting, it's easier because basically you. As I said, it's basically you take all the methodology which has been done to in the sampling case for the optimization case, and you can more or less translate it to the sampling case. But of course, in the non-convex case, well, you can prove things. In non-convex case, you prove convergence in Wasserstein distance and even total variation distance, and you can prove a lot of things with. So there. We did that, but also Michael Jordan did it with Ma and the students. They use different techniques, by the way, but it's more like a type of perturbation. It's more perturbation type result. So it's more like a perturbation of. So not in the federated learning case. It's like a perturbation result, and you show that the perturbation, in fact, does not hurt too much. Okay, and the way so there are many different methods which have been proposed. To do this, and so we used kind of the methods we used are not perhaps optimal because we were more or less the first to do that with Alain. So it was a PhD of Alain in 2015 or something like that. And now there are better techniques which show up, better methods to use, Malevin calculus, something like that. So there are people have improved the results already. So they improved with respect to what we did, in fact. So it's so we use a method which was more or less based on a change of measure argument, and so the change of measure argument is not perfect, and the control that you have is not very optimal. So you most likely you don't have the optimal results.
One thing that people use in federated learning are these local steps, as in local gradient descent and so on. So did you find a way to?
Yeah, that would be very nice. That would. This is why we are looking at federated learning case. So we're federated averaging. So where we use because in federated averaging, what you can do is that you can do some steps locally, so you don't have to transmit gradient activity.
Right. So I don't know when our next meeting is scheduled, but maybe I'll tell you something what I think about this, because
okay.
There's a different way of thinking of this, and maybe then things become simpler.
Okay. It would be nice. I would be. I'm completely ready to discuss this point. Very ready.
I'm sorry that I'm taking all this time asking questions. Please, everybody, if you wish to ask, just raise your hand or unmute.
Yeah, actually, I have something in mind. So,
okay, go ahead.
Do you have examples of? Do you have applications of this federated sampling problem? Have you seen any applications of this? And more generally, of more general distributed sampling problems, like this one, like the product of.
Okay, so there are right now. I think there are a lot of. So there are a lot of results for what is called Bayesian neural net. So in fact, if you do uncertainty quantification with neural net, with deep net, it's very important. Especially, it's very important in vision problems. So when one of the main application of Bayesian neural net is in vision problem, and when you take an image and you do a kind of segmentation of the image, okay, by it's what you call pixel by pixel. You say, okay, this is background pixel, this is trees, this is or this is vegetation, this is a car, this is a person, and things like that. So it's like it's what they call semantic segmentation of images. And of course, there are a lot of errors there. Okay, and what you will typically do is that you will do you need to do uncertainty quantification for that. And so so of course right now this is done by you use huge model for doing this. It's okay, that's perfectly fine. That it's so all the data are centralized. And now imagine that you are looking at cars. Okay, so you will have each car will have its own sensors. Okay, and then the people will need to share. So they will not. They don't want to. They will not transmit all their images, of course, to a central server, but they will need to share to have a kind of error model. Okay, so a way to control to compute uncertainty quantification locally to know how good or bad are their prediction, because it's very crucial in this type of problems, and especially to detect out of distribution, to detect things that they don't know. In fact, it's very important in machine learning, because machine learning are very overconfident in their prediction. Okay, so this is where Bayesian techniques are very important, because Bayesian techniques are very important because you can do. They are very good at out of distribution, so detecting that things, that you have uncertainty on some part, and this is not good. And so I think there are a lot of potential for that. But of course, there are many problems to solve. So there are few papers on Bayesian federated learning. A few papers, but not much, but few. Okay. There are a lot of papers in Bayesian neural nets, so there's a lot of papers. So there is then a competition for NeXTNIPs. There is a competition on Bayesian neural nets, so it's a huge field, especially for vision problem. People are very interested in this for computer vision. So it's more like it's the computer vision is really the driving force in machine learning for uncertainty quantification. Of course, there are many other applications of uncertainty quantification, but in machine learning, it's really the vision problem are really the driving force. And I really believe that there will be a lot of application in federated learning context, but there are not much, because it's a field which is. But it seems so obvious that, for example, in vision problem, you will not share all your images centrally. So I think I have a lot of confidence that it will work. Yeah.
And so you have ideas to go you said you want to go beyond the strongly convex case. So
of course. No, that's strongly convex. No, strongly convex. And if you just do a strongly convex and logistic regression, I think it's not okay. It's very convinced of that.
Yeah, my question is, do you
when you do uncertainty quantification in Bayesian neural network context, of course, there are many other problems. So I just described one part of the problem. So because there are the problems, so the specification of prior is very important, because the number of parameters is very large. So in fact, it's very crucial the way you specify the prior distribution is very important. The way you represent, because you will how you represent the posterior distribution. So because when you have ImageNet, you have 1 million of samples, so you don't want to have a collection. You cannot sample, so you will not produce thousands of replicates of this of your weight. So you need to do something else. So you need to represent the distribution differently, perhaps by variational methods or something like that. You need. So there are many other problems that we not discussed. Here I just discussed it like it's like the first. It's not. Yes, it's just the first baby step to solve the problem. It's not at all.
My question is actually. Do you know how you want to proceed? Do you know what kind of techniques? Have you? I mean, do you have any?
We need to wrap up. So I need to thank you. Thank for the invitation. And I need to go back to my meeting now in Switzerland.
Okay.
So I go to Paris to Bern. Okay, so thanks a lot for your attention. Thanks a lot, Peter, and keep in touch.
Thanks a lot for the discussion and for the very nice talk. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.